Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we will see Introduction to Python Programming Language. Python is very popular and a high-level programming language used for general purpose. It was developed in 1991 and further advancement was carried out under Python Software Foundation. The language is designed to emphasize code readability and simple English keywords in the syntax. The most interesting part is favor line of codes that allows user to develop the code easily and with better understanding. Python can express the same logic in less number of lines as expressed in C, C++ or any other conventional programming languages. Some of the key aspects of Python are: it is dynamic and interpreted language. That means the code can be executed without pre-compilation. Important elements like data types, variable declaration, function definitions are not required in Python. For example, in C and C++, in order to declare a variable, we also need to mention its type. Suppose we are declaring an integer, we need to write int a equal to 5, where int is the data type. But in Python, we can simply write a equal to 5 without mentioning the type. In case we are declaring a decimal number, we need to write float b equal to 3.2. But in Python, we can simply write b is equal to 3.2 and the interpreter will automatically take care of the data type. Similarly, there is no need to declare function return type. So it is user-friendly and hassle-free. Python is open source language and free to use even in commercial projects. Thousands of modules and libraries are offered by Python Package Index that makes the language more favorable for the development. We will discuss this package index in details in upcoming session. Let's explore various applications of Python programming language. It is used for web and internet development using Flask and Django framework. In data science, Python is used in data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and their associated operations like image processing. In STEM education, Python is favorite to promote among students to learn the concept of programming. Desktop GUI-based software are also developed on Python. Numerous embedded and IoT applications use Python for smart cities projects like smart home, smart bins, smart cars, and many more. Now, let's have some real-time Python projects that are a part of our daily routines, like Google search engine, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, and Dropbox. These projects use Python for various purposes, varying from system administration to data analytics. This tells the versatility of the Python language. According to data collected by various experts from various websites, shows that Python is one of the most popular programming language around the globe. Python beats other conventional languages like Java, C, C#, C++ as per the latest trends shown by few websites. So that's all in this session. See you in the next. Hello and welcome to this session. In this session, we will see how to download and install the Anaconda distribution for Windows OS. Anaconda is one of the most popular software used in the field of data science and machine learning, and we are going to use it very often in this series. So here we are on our browser on the Google search homepage. We can simply search for the term Anaconda. In the results, we can see that it has found the link to Anaconda platform. Let's visit this website. Now we are at the homepage of Anaconda platform website. In the products drop-down, you will notice that a number of editions are available. Out of all the editions, the individual edition is open source, as you can see. So let's select this individual edition. As you can see, it is a complete toolkit for data science and have over 20 million users worldwide. As mentioned earlier also, it is open source and most popular Python distribution. Its repository has over 7,500 data science and machine learning packages, and the environment management is very convenient. Let's click on download and it will take us to the download section. Here we can see that the software is available for Windows OS, Mac OS as well as Linux based OS, which is a great thing. Since we are running on 64-bit Windows OS, we will select the Python 3 installer for the same. Kindly note, if you are watching this at some point in the future, there may be new release of Python, maybe Python 3.8 or so on. But the installation process will hopefully be similar in that case also. Anaconda updates the outlook of their website from time to time. So if in your case, the outlook seems to be different, just try to find the individual edition and then the download section and you will be good to go. So I will save the installer in my downloads folder. It may take some time depending upon the internet connection. Let's proceed further and run the downloaded installer. Just follow the steps along. We will install it for the current user only. You can change the installation directory, but we are going to go with the default directory. Upon clicking next, it might show a warning or not based on your user folder name. We will ignore this warning and proceed further. In the advanced option, the installer recommends not to add Anaconda to path variable. But we recommend that you add it to your path, especially if you do not have any prior installation related to Python or Anaconda. Doing this will enable us to call the Python interpreter and other features directly from the command prompt, irrespective of the directory you are in. Let's click on install and rest of the installation should go on smoothly. In case of any issue, drop a query and we'll be happy to help. The installation will take a few minutes. So the installation is complete. Let's click next. Since we do not want to go through the Anaconda tutorial as of now, we will uncheck it and finish. You may go through the Anaconda official tutorial if you are interested. That's all in this session. In the next session, we are going to dive into Anaconda. Hello and welcome to this session. Previously, we had seen how to install the Anaconda platform. Anaconda is a distribution of Python, which means that it does not just include Python, but it also includes a lot of libraries and tools. So in this session, we are going to see how we can use Jupyter, which is one of the development environment included by the Anaconda distribution. Jupyter is a very good environment where we can write our Python codes and at the same time create notes, display images, graphs, and visualization. Once you get familiar with it, you will be able to understand how powerful and convenient this tool is. You can manage your code, visualization, notes, etc. all in one screen. It's really good for learning as well as teaching. It also allows us to run our code section by section, or we can say block by block. Although Python is supported by various IDEs, but we will be using Jupyter in our session. You are free to explore other IDEs as per your convenience and can have your own setup. If you are a beginner, we suggest that you use Anaconda with Jupyter in order to synchronize with us. We assume that you have successfully installed the Anaconda software. So let's get started with Anaconda and Jupyter. Let us go to our start menu and search for Anaconda. As you can see that multiple options are available. We are going to select Anaconda Navigator and launch it. Once the Anaconda Navigator has been successfully launched, you should see few applications which are pre-installed and are ready to launch. Among these applications, Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook should be there. We will be using Jupyter Notebook for our session. So let's launch Jupyter Notebook. Following this, Jupyter Notebook should open in your browser. Please note that Jupyter officially supports latest version of the Chrome, Safari and Firefox browser. Although latest release for Opera and Edge may also work, but in case you face any issue with your browser, kindly switch your default browser to one of the supported ones. Don't use Internet Explorer as it did not work for us. As Jupyter runs on a web browser, you may think that it needs an internet connection. But I will clarify it for you. Jupyter does not need an internet connection. It uses your web browser just for the graphical interface purpose. So let's move ahead. When we open Jupyter Notebook, we will be able to see the folders and files which are located on our system, such as our downloads, documents, etc. So, in case you want to download any file and run it, you can simply locate it using the Jupyter Notebook itself and then edit or run it. Also, we have provided some reference code and notes in the form of Jupyter Notebook document files or .ipynb files. You can download this from the downloadable content section and you may refer to them as per your requirements. These files may not automatically open upon double clicking. You may open this directly from the Jupyter Notebook from your browser, like this. Find the file on your desk, click it, and it should be open on your Jupyter Notebook. So that's all in this session. See you in the next one. Hello and welcome to this session. In the previous session, we learned how to launch Jupyter Notebook and its features. In this session, we are going to write our first Python program on Jupyter and we are going to run it. So here I have a Jupyter Notebook launched in my web browser. I'm going to create a folder in which I will be saving my codes or notebook files. So let me create a folder. As you can see that a new folder has been created by the name Untitled folder. Let's select it using this checkbox and then rename it. You may type in whatever name you like. I'm going to name it Python Basics. As you can see that the folder has been renamed. Let's open it by clicking it. As you can see, this folder is currently empty. We are going to create a new Python notebook in this folder. Just go to New and select Python 3 under the section of Notebook. This will open another tab in your browser, which is going to be your Python notebook. As you can see, the file is currently untitled. I'm going to rename it. So you can either go to the file drop down and click on rename, or you can just click here on untitled and then rename it. I'm going to rename this file as hello_python. Now the file has been successfully renamed. If you go back to your previous tab, you will see that a new file with a given name and .ipynb format is there. Okay, so let's go back to our hello_python notebook. This box or tab which you see here is the space in which we can write our code headings, etc. depending on the type selected. The type of this cell can be changed from this drop down menu. Typically used types are markdown and code. Let us first see what a markdown cell is. Suppose I want to give a heading to my code. I can do it by inserting hash in my markdown cell. So let's insert the heading as first Python program. we will first type a hash followed by a space and then our heading. Remember, inserting the space is very important. Now, we can run this by clicking on this run symbol. Okay, we are done with the heading. Let's insert a code cell. You can insert a new cell by clicking on this plus symbol here. Or you can use the keyboard shortcut Escape plus B, which insert a cell below. You can refer to the keyboard shortcuts from the Help drop-down menu. Keyboard shortcuts will be very handy in the future. Okay, now a new cell has been added. Let's click here and write our first piece of code. We want to print the sentence Hello Python. So we will write print, then open the brackets or parenthesis and open the quotation, and we will write our desired sentence between these quotes. Now we can run this code by clicking on this run symbol. So as you can see, Python has printed the sentence as we required. Let's add a comment to our code so that if needed we can later understand what our code does. These comments are very important when you write lengthy and complex code. In case you forgot what the code was about, you can always refer the added comments. They are also very helpful if you are giving your code to someone else. The other person may refer your comments to understand your code. So you can add a comment by mentioning a hash in your code and then writing its description like this. Let's save this by clicking the save icon or Ctrl+S. Now let's add another cell and see another instance of the print statement. This time we are going to assign a value to a variable and then print it. So let's create a variable with the name var and assign it value 5. You may choose the variable name as you wish. Let's write our print statement and run it. So you can see that the value of the variable has been printed. If you notice, this time I did not use the quotation around the var in my print statement. Why so? If we put quotation in our print statement, the mentioned text will be printed as it is. Let's see with help of an example. This time I'm going to put quotation around var in my print statement and then run it. So you will notice that the expression var is printed as it is. This is called printing a string. So now I hope that you have understood the difference between the uses of both. So let me add the comments to my code and then save it. As I already told you, code commenting is a very good practice for any programmer and you should make it a habit. So that's all for this session. Hello and welcome to this session. We are going to discuss some essential concepts of Python through the next few sessions. In this session, we are going to learn about some of the basic data types in the Python programming language. You can also refer the downloadable notebook for this session. So let's create a new notebook for this. I'm going to rename this notebook as Python_data types. Let me give some heading to this. Let's start with the most basic data type, which are numbers. Let's enter an integer number in our cell, say 3, and run it. The interpreter will echo the same number as you can see. But officially, if you want to print anything, the actual way to do so is to enclose it within the print statement. So let's try that. We'll write print, open the brackets, and type the number that we want to display, and then close the bracket. This will print the number enclosed. Now let's make use of variable in order to store numbers. We'll do this in a new cell or a block. Again, let's start with an integer, say 8. So we can write a equals to 8, and in order to print it, we can write print a within brackets. Let's understand this cell. First, the statement a equal to 8. The variable a will get some space on our system memory, and this statement will assign the variable a with the value 8. Then the print statement will simply print the content of the variable a. Similarly, we can assign decimal numbers to variable. Decimal numbers are called float data type. So let's write b equal to 2.7. You can choose any decimal number you want. And let's print it. You can see that the number has been printed. As I mentioned, a is an integer type variable and b is a float type variable. We can confirm this using the inbuilt function known as type. You can check the data type of any variable like this. Simply write print and type of a within brackets, where a is the variable whose data type we need to know. So as you can see that a is int and b is float. These data types can hold positive as well as negative numbers. Now let's perform some arithmetic operation on our variables. Let's say we want to add a and b and print the result. We can do this by writing print a plus b. So you can see the result is 7.7. The plus symbol used here is an arithmetic operator. Now suppose you want to store this result in another variable. You can do this by writing c equal to a plus b, where c is the variable which will hold the result of summation. Printing c will also give the same result. These variable names can be selected as per your convenience. Also, kindly note that the variable names are case sensitive. Let's proceed further and see another example. We will assign the value -10 to a variable p and a value 7 to another variable q. Let's multiply both these variables and store the result in a variable called product by writing product equal to p asterisk symbol q. Here the arithmetic operator is an asterisk that indicates multiplication operation. Let's print the result by writing print within bracket product. You can see that the result is -70. Similarly, there are some other basic arithmetic operations like subtraction, division, modulus. Modulus returns the remainder when first operand is divided by the second and the operator is a percentage sign. Refer to the cells and comments for more details and try this operation on your own. Remember that the operator precedence for computer system works differently. Therefore, in case you are using multiple operators within one statement, do not forget to enclose different operation within brackets as per your requirement. Python also supports complex number. A complex number is a number with real and imaginary components. For example, 8 plus 2j is a complex number where 8 is the real component and 2 multiplied by j, which is the imaginary component. So let's assign a complex number to a variable named comp by writing comp equal to 8 plus 2j. Now if you print the type of variable comp, you'll be able to see that it is of type complex. Arithmetic operations are also possible on complex number. So let's define another complex number with name comp1 and assign it value 2 plus 5j. So we'll perform subtraction and addition on comp and comp1 and print the result like this. Let's move forward to another type of data type, which is Boolean. There are two built-in Boolean values. One is true and another one is false. Note that T and F are capital in both the cases. Lower cases of T and F will not work since Python is a case-sensitive language. Again, you can confirm the data type using the type method. Boolean data types are very useful for various concepts like loops, conditional statements, and logical operation, which we will discuss later in detail. Now let's discuss another data type called string. A string is nothing but a sequence of characters. They are written by enclosing the sequence of character within single or double quotes. So let's define a string. We'll use the variable name str1. So str1 is equal to double quote Python like this. Now let's print str1 and its type. You can see that the enclosed characters have been printed and the type is str. As I already mentioned that strings are sequences of characters. Therefore, you can also access each characters one by one starting from the index 0 by mentioning the index within the square brackets. As we know that the 6 characters are there in the word Python, so our last index will be 5 as the starts from 0. You can see that all the 6 characters have been printed individually. We can also join two string. Let's see with the help of an example. We'll declare another string str2 and we'll assign it with the sentence is easy. Now we'll join str1 and str2 using the plus operator and we'll assign it to another variable called str3. So let's write str3 equal to str1 plus str2 and print it. Note that we forgot to add the space character before the character I. So let's include the space character and run it again. So you can see that the new string has been printed which says Python is easy. Wasn't it easy? So let's proceed further. You can use the print statement in many ways, some of which are mentioned in the next cell along with their output. You can try them and use them as per your requirement and convenience. They are very useful throughout the Python programming. Now that we have basic knowledge about print statement, strings, Boolean and other number data types, let's use this knowledge and perform some logical operation and print result in a meaningful manner. The three logical operators we are going to discuss are AND, OR and NOT. These are very useful for conditional statement and flow control, which will be covered in details in the next session. So let's discuss the first logical operator, which is logical AND. Logical AND gives a true output when all the operands are true. In order to see this, we are going to declare two variables, s1 and s2, and assign them value true and true. Now let's print s1 and s2. So you can see that the result is true. If we change the value of either of the variable to false, the output will be false. You can understand it by an example. Say S1 and S2 are two buttons in a machine. Only when the both buttons are pressed, the machine works. Even if one of the button is released, the machine will stop working. I hope you get the idea of this. You can also refer the truth table of AND gate for more clarity. Let's move to logical OR. In the case of logical OR, even if one of the button is pressed, the machine will work. Therefore, even one of the variable is true, the output of print S1 or S2 will be true. The output will be false only when both the variable are false. Again, you may refer the truth table of OR gate for more clarity. Let's move ahead to logical NOT. This is simple and used to negate or invert any boolean. Let's change the value of S1 to true and S2 to true. Let's write result equal to S1 and S2, then print result. You can see that the result is true. Now let's print NOT of result like this. So now you can see the result has been successfully inverted. You can understand it with an example that a machine has only one button. When the button is not pressed, the machine will work, and when it is pressed, the machine will stop. Another data type commonly used in Python is list. List is a collection of one or more items, and these items may or may not be of same data type. These items are comma separated and enclosed inside square brackets. Let's declare a list which contains names of different countries like India, Japan, Singapore, China, Australia. So let's name our variable list1 and create the list like this. Now print the list. As you can see that all the items have been printed. We can also access each element of the list separately as we did in case of string. Again, the index starts from 0. Let's print the item present at the second index by mentioning the index in square bracket. So you can see that the Singapore has been printed. You can also try out example like nested list, where another list is there inside a list, and an example where all the elements of the list are of different data types. We can also create a new list by using just a section of our previous list by slicing it. For example, we can create a list named list2 which contain second and third element of list1. We can do it like this: 2:4. If you want the list 3 to be second element till the last element of list 1, we can simply write square bracket 2 colon. We can also reverse the list by mentioning 2 colons and a -1. So this is a very good trick. We'll use this technique in ML as well as computer vision regularly. We can remove items from list using the method called remove and mentioning the item as a parameter like this. So you can see China has been removed from the list. Or you can alternatively also use the pop method and mention the index number as the parameter of pop. If no parameter is given to pop, it will remove the last element of the list. You can also add element at the end of list using the append method and by mentioning the element in the parameter. Alternatively, you can insert an element at a specific index by using the insert method and providing the first parameter as index and the second parameter as item. Another data type known as tuple. It is similar to a list except the difference that lists are mutable and tuple are immutable. Tuples are declared by enclosing parameters within parentheses like this. Now let's see the dictionary data type. Dictionary is also a collection data type and it contains key value pairs. One or more key value pairs separated by comma are put inside curly brackets to form a dictionary object. Let's define a dictionary as D1 where first key is banana and value is yellow. The second key is apple and the value is red. We can use the key to find the corresponding value of the key. The last data type we are going to discuss in this session are sets. A set is a collection of data types in Python. A set object contains one or more items, not necessarily of the same type, which are separated by comma and enclosed in curly brackets. A set doesn't store duplicate objects. Even if an object is added more than once inside the curly brackets, only one copy is held in the set object. As you can also see in this cell that only one copy of the number 2 is held by the set S2. Hence, indexing and slicing operation cannot be done on a set object. Different set operation like union, intersection, etc. are supported by Python. So that's all for this session. I hope that you have understood the concept explained through this session. See you in the next one. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this session. In the previous session, we learned about different data types supported by the Python programming language. We also used some basic operators to perform arithmetic as well as logical operation. In this session, we'll cover comparison operators, conditional statements, loops, and control statement. So let's start. We'll discuss comparison operators first. These operators will be used in flow control and conditional statements very often. The first operator is greater than operator. Let's understand this with the help of an example. We'll assign the value 10 to a variable x using the assignment operator, which is a single equal to sign. And we will assign the value 17 to a variable y. Let's write print x greater than y and run our code. So as you can see that the result is false because 10 is not greater than 17. Now in another print statement, in place of greater than operator, we'll place the less than operator and check the result. So let's write print x less than y and run our code. As you can see that the result is true because 10 is less than 17. Let's declare another variable named z, which will also hold the value 10. We'll use the equality operator to check if z is equivalent to x and if z is equivalent to y. The equal to operator has two equal to signs. Do not confuse this with the assignment operator, which is a single equal to sign. The assignment operator assigns a specific value to a variable, whereas the equality operator checks if the operands are equal to each other. So let's write print z double equal to x and run it. You can see that the result is true because value of z and value of x are same. Let's write print z double equal to y and run it. You can see that the result is false because value of z and value of y are different. So we have seen three operators till now: greater than, less than, and equality operator. There are other three comparison operators: not equal to, which is written as an exclamation sign followed by an equal sign. Operators such as greater than, equal to, and less than equal to are also available. You can try this on your own. Again, operator precedence should be taken care of when using multiple operators within one statement without parentheses to separate the operations. You can check the operator precedence in the Python documentation. For example, if you are performing an arithmetic operation where x is added with y and then multiplied with z, you must practice to write it as x plus y in a single bracket, then multiplied by z, and enclosing this complete expression in bracket. This will give you a result 270, whereas if you write it like x plus y multiplied by z, it will result in 180. I hope you have understand this difference. You may practice some operations on your own to get familiar with it. So let's move further and discuss about conditional statement. One of the most commonly used conditional statement are if, elif, else statement. These are used in case where a decision making is required, when certain action should take place when specific conditions are met. The syntax for this is if test expression colon followed by one or many statements which will be in the indented block. Let's see this with the help of an example. We will declare a variable named var1 whose value can be chosen and changed by you. For now, I will assign it with integer 5. Now, we want Python to check and then tell us by printing that the number is positive or the number is negative or the number is 0. So let's write a piece of code like this. If var1 greater than 0 colon indent print number is positive, unindent elif var1 less than 0 colon indent print number is negative, else colon indent print number is 0. Let's run this. We can see that it has printed that the number is positive. Instead of using else as the last condition, you may also write it like elif var1 double equal to 0 colon. This way the condition will be checked before printing the result. There are use case of elif and else depending on the application. Now you can change the value of var1, run the code again and check the result for different values. Also note that indentation is very important. Any statement written under one statement must be indented to fall under that conditional statement. You can add multiple statement or operation under one condition. Unlike other languages like C and C++, curly braces are not used in Python. Instead, the code is indented. Now let's see ternary operators. Let's say var1 equal to 5 and var2 equal to 10. Now we want to write the minimum of these two to another variable called minimum. We can do this with the help of ternary operator by writing minimum equal to var1 if var1 is less than var2, else var2, and then print minimum. I hope you have understood the concept of conditional statement. You can try some logics on your own for practice. Let's go further and discuss about loops. Loops are very commonly used in real work Python programs. Loops make our code convenient, short, and hassle-free. Let's say that you want to print digits from 1 to 100. One way is to print each digit individually. This way, you will have to write 100 different print statements with the digits as their parameters. Is it convenient? No. So we can solve this problem using loops. We can also implement different concepts like arithmetic operation, logical operation, conditional statements within these loops. Let's see with an example of a type of loop which is called while loop. As the name suggests, this loop will run while some condition is met. Let's define a variable I and assign it value 1 by writing I equal to 1. Now let's write our loop and its condition. Since we want to print integers up to 100, we'll write while I is less than or equal to 100, colon, indent, print I plus equal to 1, which is equivalent to writing I equal to I plus 1. Unindent, print series printed. Now let's run our code. So you can see that the 100 digits have been printed. Suppose if you want to print only the odd number, instead of writing I plus equal to 1, you can write I plus equal to 2. So only the odd numbers are printed in the series. You see how convenient is this? This is used in various applications where a certain task needs to be repeated various times while a condition is met. We can also use a control statement called break to exit this loop in between in case any needed condition is met in middle of the loop. You can refer to the example in my downloadable notebook of this session. Let's move forward and discuss another type of loop which is called for loop. A for loop is used for iterating over a sequence that is either a list, a tuple, a dictionary, a set, or a string. With the for loop, we can execute a set of statements once for each item in a list, tuple, set, etc. Loop continues until we reach the last item in the sequence. The body of for loop is separated from the rest of the code using indentation. Let's see an example of this. Let's define a list named countries which contain 5 elements where the elements are India, China, Japan, Sri Lanka, Bhutan. We want to print these elements without writing a separate print statement for each element. Therefore, we will use for loop. Let's write for x in countries, colon, indent, print x, unindent, and let's run the code. So you can see that each element has been printed without writing separate print statements. Now let's include a condition in the body of this for loop. Suppose we do not want to print China, we can write if x is not equal to China, colon, and then indent print x as body of this if statement. When you run this code, you can see that the China is not printed. Alternatively, you can also use the continue statement by changing the logic little bit. The continue statement is a control statement just like break is. The continue statement is used to skip the rest of the code inside a loop for the current iteration only. Loop does not terminate but continues on with the next iteration. You can also use the break statement to break the printing once a certain condition is matched. Now let's print a series of number using for loop. Suppose we want to print value from 0 to 8. we can use the range function. We'll write for x in range within brackets 9 colon print x in the next line by adding indent. If you run this code, it will return value from 0 to 8 as 9 is excluded from the sequence being the upper limit of range function. The range function defaults to 0 as a starting value. However, it is possible to specify the starting value by adding a parameter. Like instead of range 9, if we write range 2, 9, then this will return values from 2 to 8 excluding 9 from the sequence. Similarly, the range function defaults to increment the sequence by 1. However, it is also possible to specify the increment value by adding a third parameter. Like if we write range 2, 9, 3, it will return 2, 5, 8 excluding 9. As you can see, the increment of 3 in each number printed in the sequence. If you see in the third example, there are 3 parameters used within range function, where first parameter is the initial number to start with. Second parameter is the limit up to which the sequence will run. And the third parameter is update interval by which the sequence is incremented or decremented. So that's all for this session, and I hope you have understood the concept explained throughout this session. For any query, feel free to get in touch with us. See you in the next session. Hello and welcome to this session. In the previous session, we discussed about user-defined function and their application along with variable scope. In this session, we are going to discuss about a function which is called lambda function or anonymous function. A lambda function is a function which is defined without name. As discussed earlier, classical user-defined functions are defined using def keyword. Lambda or anonymous function are defined using the lambda keyword. Lambda function can have only one expression but can have multiple arguments. Syntax of lambda function is lambda arguments colon expression. So let's see an example of the lambda function. Suppose we want to double n number, we can use a lambda function to do this job. Let's define a lambda function. Double equal to lambda y colon y into 2. So our lambda function has been defined. In the above program, lambda y colon y into 2 is the lambda function. Here y is the argument and y multiplied by 2 is the expression that gets evaluated and returned. This function has no name. It returns a function object which is assigned to the identifier double. We can now call it as normal function. So let's use this function to print the double of a number. So I'll write print double the argument within brackets. So you can see that double of the argument has been printed. This is equivalent to normal function which may have been defined by the classical method where we had to write def, a function name and the body. You might think that why we use lambda function when we can create a function in the classical manner. The answer is we use lambda function when we require a function for a short period of time. And lambda function has application when some function need another function as their parameter, such as map function. We'll discuss this in the later section. Let's see another instance of lambda function before we wrap up this session. This time we'll do something interesting. using the combination of a classical function and the lambda function. Let's define a classical function and name it as func. This function will accept one parameter and will return a lambda function. So let's write the code. The expression of lambda function will be evaluated in such a way that the parameter of classical function will be multiplied with the argument of the lambda function. Since our classical function will return the lambda function, we will end up with a lambda function object. This object will accept a parameter which is nothing but the value which will be placed in place of the argument of lambda function. So using this we can create multiple objects which can be used to double a number, triple a number, or 4 times a number, and so on. You'll understand this when I run this code. So let me complete the code. Let's create a doubler object using func of 2 and a tripler object func of 3. Now let's use doubler and tripler and then print the result. Let's run it. So you can see that 10 has been doubled, and from the next statement 10 has been tripled. You can create as many of these by changing the parameter of func. So that's all in this session. I hope you have enjoyed the session. See you in the next one. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this session. In this session we'll be discussing a very important programming technique known as modular programming. Through this session we'll also discuss some of the concepts related to Python modules and packages. So let's begin. Modular programming is a very common as well as important practice in almost all famous programming languages, and Python is no different. Modular programming is a technique which allows us to break down large programs into smaller and more manageable pieces of codes. Doing so provides us various benefits, such as resulting in simplicity of the code, meaning that any programmer can understand the code with less effort in lesser time. It also aids maintainability. Better maintainability means that the code can be logically managed in the storage space and can also be worked upon by a team of different programmers. Any large program for a specific application may contain few or several smaller sections, where each section contributes something to the complete application. For example, when designing a game, one section of the code may be responsible for providing the graphics to the game. Another section may be responsible for managing the user files. Another may be responsible for logic running in the background. When modularized and maintained properly, different people may work on different sections or modules of the code and then combine these modules together, which will finally result in the complete working of game. Modularizing the program also inspires reusability. For example, one module developed for a game to save the user progress may be used as it is in another game. Hence, the development time and effort will be reduced just because of modular programming. Modular programming also allows us to manage the scope of variable with ease. Functions, module and packages all are concept of modular programming practice. We have already discussed function, and in this session we'll be focusing on modules and packages. In Python, a module is nothing but a Python file with .py extension containing a set of statements. This file may be executed directly just like any other Python program, or may be imported by any other programs or module. As discussed earlier, it helps us to maintain, simplify, and reuse the code. Any module may contain different functions, variables, classes, as well as runnable code. When imported by any other program or module, these functions, variable, classes may be accessed by the calling program or module. There are various ways to use a module in our code. Let's take a look at some of the examples using built-in Python modules. So we have jumped to our Jupyter notebook. One of the built-in Python modules is math module. This offers various maths function and constant. which means that we do not have to define these functions again in our code. We can just import the math module and use the functions it offers. So let's import the math module using the statement import space math. From the math module, let us print the value of pi. To do so, we have written the statement print within brackets math.pi. So as you can see here, the value of pi has been printed. Let's now make use of a function offered by the math module. This function is degrees. This function will basically convert any radian value into degrees. So let's make use of this function to convert pi by 2 radians into degrees. So as you can see, the result is 90 degree. Similarly, pi by 4 is 45 degrees. Let's use another function to calculate square root of a number, and this function is sqrt. Writing math.sqrt with parameter as 4 will give us the square root of 4. Instead of importing any module directly with its name, we can also import the module but can refer it with some other name. So let's import math but call it just m. The syntax to do so is import math as m. Now that we have imported math as m, we will refer m and call the function of the main module like this. Whether we import the modules with its own name or any other name, its functions are not directly accessible in our code. For example, in order to access the sqrt function, we cannot write sqrt directly. We need to write math.sqrt. But let's say we directly want to access sqrt in our code. We can import the function sqrt itself from the math library. In order to do so, we have to write the statement from math import sqrt. Now we can directly write sqrt 16 and the result will be printed as if it was a function defined in our code. Similarly, we can also import pi in our local code and directly print the value of pi like this. Let's say you want to import all such constituent of the module into your code. You may write from math import star. The asterisk here basically means that we want to import each and every function of variable from the math library to our code in order to directly use it. Just like the math module as shown in this notebook, there are many other inbuilt modules such as time, OS, sys, etc. And apart from the built-in modules, the programmer can create custom modules as well. And these are called user-defined modules. Let's try to create a simple module. So here we are in our Jupyter Explorer. Let's create a new Python notebook and rename it as custom. So here we have defined a new variable named var and a new function called new_func, which accepts 2 numbers and returns their product. Let's go to File, select the Download as option and select the Python option and save it in our project directory as custom.py. You can give it any name you like, but the same name should be used when you import this as a module. Let's now go to our previous notebook file and import the newly created module. Once imported, we can write the statement custom.var to print the value of variable defined in the custom module. As you can see, the value has been printed. We can also use the function new_func to multiply 2 and 4 and the result has been printed as shown here. So this was an example to create a simple custom module and how to use it in another program. For any module, inbuilt or user defined, you may check the available variables or functions using the dir function. The dir function will accept the module name as the parameter and print the constituent of the module in an alphabetical manner. As you can see here, I have used the dir function to check the offerings of math function, and a complete list of functions and variables have been printed. Similarly, we can do the same thing for our custom module. Now let's understand how Python looks for the module when you import it. Basically, when any module is interpreted, Python searches it in three locations. The first location is the directory from which our code is being executed. If Python finds the module in this directly, the import will be done immediately. In case it fails to find the package in the working directory, the search will move on to all the directories mentioned in the Python path environment variable. If found, the import will be done, but in case the module is still not found, the final search will be done in the default directory, such as the installation directory. But the default directory may vary operating system to operating system. Now that we have understood what are modules, let's try to understand that what. The concept of packages in Python is similar to the folder structure of file system on an operating system. Just like we organize one type of files in one folder or directory, similarly multiple modules of similar type may be contained by a package. And just like a folder may contain subfolders on our operating systems, a package may also contain subpackages. Here we have illustrated a package with this diagram. The package has been named test_package and it contains three modules: modules_1.py, module_2.py, and module_3.py. As you may notice, the test package also contains another Python file name init.py. This is a special file which may be empty but must be contained in the package. So assume that we had to use one of the modules from this package, let's say module_2.py. The statement to do so would have been from test_package import module_2. Further, any function or variables from the module_2 can be used just like we saw in case of modules. There are many Python packages which are very commonly used. Some of them are OpenCV, which is used for image processing application, sklearn, which is used for machine learning application, matplotlib, which is used for plotting data. You may create your own packages and modules to practice, and you may also explore about various built-in Python modules. So that's all in. Hello and welcome to this session. In this session, we'll be discussing about an important component of computing. This component is known as GUI or Graphical User Interface. Throughout this session, we will be discussing various aspects of GUI, such as its overview, importance, features, and usage of Python package tkinter to develop GUIs. As the name suggests, Graphical User Interface gives the user a way to interact with the system or the computer through graphics. Imagine using a set of few commands to copy and paste your files or to create a new folder. This may be easy for an advanced user or let's say a programmer, but could be extremely inconvenient for a daily user with little or no technical knowledge. In this case, GUI simplifies the task and provides us with graphics to copy and paste the file or to create a new folder. Just make a few clicks and the job is done. Hence, a self-explanatory and easy to use GUI is important in order to make the computer software usable to the end user. The powerful language Python offers various options for developing GUIs. These options include tkinter, Kiwi, Python Qt, WXPython, JPython. In this session, we will be taking a look at some of the features of Tkinter. We will also be using the concept of Tkinter to develop the GUI for our project. Tkinter is an interface to the TK Toolkit, which is a free and open source cross-platform widget toolkit. Being cross-platform means that it can run on Linux, Mac OS as well as Windows. Tkinter is the standard GUI library for Python. It provides us with a fast, object-oriented and an easy way to create GUI application. Common GUI elements accessible via Tkinter are buttons, menus, entry field, and display areas. Let us take a look at the general process of creating a GUI using Tkinter. As Tkinter is a package, in order to use its component, the first step is to import the package. Once imported successfully, we create the main window or frame for the GUI. On the main window, multiple widgets like buttons, radio buttons, messages can be added. Following this, we enter the main event loop. This loop basically checks for any other events happening like a key press or button press. Upon the trigger event like key press or button presses, our code performs dedicated action like displaying a message, closing the GUI, and so on. Now that we have understood the general process to create a GUI, let us take a look at some of widgets that are offered by Tkinter. There are many widgets such as button, canvas, check button, radio button, etc. Let us discuss some important ones. Button widget is a UI element that is used to trigger any action upon click. A button displays text with a background image or background color. One of the applications of this widget can be on the login or sign up windows of GUIs. Some of the configurable parameters for this widget are background color, font, width, height, etc. Another important widget is the message widget. This widget can be used to display text. Again, there are several configurable parameters for this widget. Now that you know some of the basics of GUI design, you might be curious that where can we use a GUI? There are various applications of GUIs. You can design a GUI to create your own calculator or calendar. You can create a management system for a school, college, or an enterprise. GUIs can be found in attendance system, elevator monitoring system, or even coffee vending machines. Now, let's move forward and create our first GUI. For this, we have jumped to our Jupyter notebook. First, let us learn how to create the main window for our GUI. For this, we need to first import the Tkinter module. Here, we have written the statement from Tkinter import asterisk, which means that we are importing all components from the Tkinter package into our code. Let us create a Tkinter object instance and call it R. Let us define the size of the window using this statement. We can define the background color of the window. Currently, we are defining the background to be blue in color. This window needs to have a title. We can define the name by writing r.title, and within brackets you can write new GUI window. You can select the suitable title. This title will be displayed at the topmost section on the window, which is also known as title bar. In order to execute the created GUI, we will enter the main loop using r.mainLoop statement. So, as you can see, we have a new window where the background color is blue and the title is New GUI Window. Now, let us see how to add the button widget to the GUI. Here we have written a few statements to create a blank GUI just like we did in the last cell. The only difference is that here the window is slightly smaller, red in color instead of blue, and the title is hexen bit. Now we are adding the button using this statement. Here R is the frame on which we are adding the button. The text which we want to display on the button is quit. The background when we click on the button will be blue and is called active background. The parameter command is set to r.destroy so that the GUI exits when we click the button. We are manually placing the button on the location 20, 100, but there are other options as well, which we have commented for now. You may uncomment and try this when you download this notebook. Now let's enter the main loop and see how our GUI works. So as you can see, the GUI window with the red background has appeared. The window contains the button which has text as quit. Let's click this button and check out the result. As you can see, when we click this button, the background of the button turns blue and the GUI window quits. So this was a simple and interactive GUI. Here we are creating another GUI window with the text widget. We have written the text as Python programming. The statement w.pack organizes the text. By default, the organization will be at the top center, but we can also align it to bottom or left. You may try the commented statement and explore more about the organization of content using the pack statement. Now let's try the message box from the TK module. Here we have created a window and added a button to it, which has text start. Here, upon click, a user-defined function called new function will be called. As you can see in the function definition of new underscore function, the message box module is used and the show info function is being called. This function will open a message box. First parameter success is the title of the message box, and the second parameter process started is the message contained by the message box. So let's execute this cell and check out the result. As you can see, the GUI works as expected. So in this session, we have shed some light on the concept of GUI and created some simple GUI application. That will be all for this session. We will be using these GUI concepts along with other Python concepts to create an interactive project.